Joining me now to discuss this trial attorney Dorit Fisher and criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor Chadha Jimenez. Welcome to you both. Dorit, to you first. What stands out to you about this case?
Well, it's a case that I think people can relate to now. A lot of people are on dating apps, and that's really scary to think that this all started from, a simple date. So I think it's going to resonate with a lot of people.
Suri, this is a case where there are 5 actual defendants that will come in one by one, not being tried together. That's an advantage to the defense typically. But I think it's easy to see where this is going. Prosecutors really do need the 18-year-old to come in, and if she sings, she can help herself. What do you think is going to stand out here? Because we have so many different players. Who was the trigger man? How do you prove the trigger man? That becomes a difficult prospect for prosecutors unless they have somebody on their side.
That's correct. I think the testimony of Bustos, which is the young woman that pretty much was the hook for the victim, in essence, she is going to lay out the whole story. And let's not forget that everybody, if most states have the concept of party to a crime, and everybody is responsible for the acts of their conspirators. So it doesn't matter whether you're the trigger man or just the driver, you're still held responsible for all the actions of your co-conspirators. But if she's smart, she's going to help herself, she's going to cooperate. It doesn't seem like she's going to walk off with a probated sentence, but definitely can avoid going to prison for life.
Yeah, absolutely. Dorit, the importance of her testimony for the state.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, as he said, we're really going to need her testimony to sort of lay out what happened here. So she's certainly going to be a very, very important witness. And I understand she's on the state's witness list so far.
Yes, she is. And, a witness like that, if she's an 18-year-old girl, now she is presumably, now she's 21, 2, somewhere in there. She's young enough to have been in a juror's mind manipulated, possibly, right? So she comes in and tells her tale, and if she does it properly, it can be really convincing. It's like, oh, she's kind of a victim too in this, even though she's not. But it's more convincing maybe than a person that's a little older that would be possibly lying about it. Hers is a tale, isn't it not? I mean, it does. If they have her, it's a lot different than having one of like the getaway driver. I mean, she was the intimate part of this whole thing, correct?
That's correct, but I think that the most important thing is for her to be truthful. Like, don't try to minimize your involvement. Don't try to say, like we're expected her to say, I only got paid $50 to set this up. That's nonsense.
Which is a disgusting fact. The fact that she was paid $50 to lure this guy, go bowling with him so that these other guys could show up with her later that night, and he ends up dead.
I'm sure he spent way more than $50 just on that date. And it seems that it is what they took. It was junk. They took used TVs, video games, 3 bottles of liquor. I mean, these guys are disgusting, and that's probably why they're going for the death penalty. And she needs to stand up, get on that stand, and tell the truth. And that way, it would help bring justice. It would help the family get some closure, and then she'll hopefully get a good deal out of it.
Yeah, this is one of those cases where sometimes we look at the defendants and we're like, I could see this defendant is not going to get a lot of love from the jury given the brutality and the senseless act here. What if you're the defense attorney here? So death case. How do you go into this?
Oh, well, that's a really good question, and I think the defense attorney here is going to have, quite an uphill battle because this was really a senseless crime. There's no reason for him to have murdered. I mean, there's no reason to have committed, the crime at all, the robbery at all. But this is a senseless crime. There's not much they got out of this. This, all factors together. Senseless.
Yeah, and presumably we don't know all the facts of the case yet. We'll hear it all laid out in openings later this week. But presumably it's going to be one of these defenses. He was there, but he didn't do anything. We'll have to see how it all plays out. All right, thank you too. You'll be with me throughout the morning here. Coming up next, infamous and eccentric real estate heir Robert Durst on trial again. This Week in Los Angeles will get you up to date on his case when we return. Stay with us. Real estate heir Robert Durst faces new charges in Los Angeles this week over the fatal murder of his former colleague Susan Berman back in the year 2000. In a controversial move, prosecutors want to introduce portions of the HBO documentary on the defendant called The Jinx, with some potentially incriminating things that Durst said while being recorded. Vinny Politan has details.
Robert Durst, the eccentric heir of a late prominent New York real estate developer, has aged drastically in front of the cameras from one court appearance to the next. Opening statements in Los Angeles are scheduled to begin this week. The case is built around a story so sensational it inspired a 2010 feature film starring Ryan Gosling titled All Good Things.
You make me out to be this person that you think that I am. I'm not this person.
Whose tagline reads, "The perfect love story until it became the perfect crime."
If anything happens to me, don't let them get away with it.
Durst is also the subject of a 6-part documentary called The Jinx.
Nobody tells the whole truth.
The show is credited in part with helping investigators build their case atop the evidence unearthed by the Jinx series.
But you can't imagine.
According to a 2019 New York Times report, Durst's defense attorneys were considering a plan to introduce raw audio from his recordings in The Jinx.
Kill them all. Of course.
Durst's lawyers assert that the filmmakers selectively pulled out specific lines to make him look guilty and edited them in a different order than how he said them. Durst, now 76, estimated to be worth $100 million, is accused of fatally shooting his best friend Susan Berman in 2000 to keep her silent about the disappearance and presumed killing of his wife Kathleen, who vanished from New York in 1982. Prosecutors say Berman is one of 2 people Durst killed to cover up the slaying of his first wife. The other murder Durst was charged with is the death of and dismemberment of his elderly neighbor Morris Black, because Black had discovered Durst's true identity.
You can't take the iceberg away from the Titanic, and you can't take away what he did to Morris Black.
At the time, to elude arrest, Durst had disguised himself as a mute woman living in a $300 a month rooming house.
Bob Durst, a multimillionaire from a billionaire family in New York, was living in Galveston in a $300 a month rundown apartment that he rented dressed as a woman under an assumed name.
Durst was tried and acquitted in the murder of Morris Black. His attorneys claim Durst shot Black in self-defense.
Will the defendant please rise? For the verdict of the jury is such. Will the jury find the defendant, Robert Durst, not guilty?
The judge told would-be jurors facing the prospect of serving 5 months in the murder trial of Robert Durst that this is a fascinating case. You're never going to have an experience like this.
It's a crazy case. Still with me, trial attorney Dorit Fisher and criminal defense attorney, former prosecutor Suri Jimenez. This is a wild. When you watch that verdict being read, it's still shocking that Galveston, Texas jury found him not guilty after he butchered his roommate or his neighbor, cut them all up. But it goes to 2 things. He took the stand, and he is eccentric, yes, but compelling. He was able to get that jury in Texas to believe his story, and he also has a fantastic legal team. Do you expect him on the stand this time around? He has aged a lot. He's a different person, I think. What do you think?
I think he might go to take the stand. I mean, we see that this is just the kind of person he is. He's maybe a little arrogant. We know that he went forth and did this documentary, The Jinx, and really, opened himself up. So I think there's a chance he'll take the stand.
Sudi, The Jinx coming into this case, pretrial rulings is allowing some of the material in. It's not going to be the exact documentary. It'll be the full transcript and full audio, presumably. Also, the producers, 1 or 2 of the producers may testify at trial here. Good. Was this a proper ruling by the judge to allow this in?
I like to get as much in as possible because we want to get to the truth. So yes, and the prosecution wants to get this because they think they have a smoking gun, they think they have a confession because the mics were on or whatever they think he said, because he likes to talk. However, I do believe his defense attorney is going to take this opportunity and do a great job at challenging them, challenging their motives. All they care about is ratings. All they care about is making money. They're using him. They've been exploiting him, and they
Say prosecutors care about ratings.
No, I'm talking about the producers that they're going to bring in.
Yeah.
Bring in those producers, cross-examine them, the defense attorneys will, and show that the audio they turned over was edited. It's not the full audio. I want to get the complete file, but they don't have it anymore. Why? So there's definitely something to hide there, and they're just doing it for publicity, and I think the defense attorneys will be able to show that.
Dorit, his defense team did a fantastic job in Texas. He's got the money to build a really impressive team. It's the same. Two of the lawyers that were in Texas have joined with two more, and their credentials across the board exceptional. How important is that, especially when you're talking about a 5-month-long trial? That's the estimated time of this. Having that type of team makes a huge difference.
Absolutely. And having good attorneys, always something that's really going to be helpful, especially in a case like this. And you also have, they're familiar with the case. They've been with him for a while. So, I mean, the defense is definitely going to need strong attorneys.
Jury was picked last week. It completed. The openings are this week. Let's take a look at the jury makeup. You've got 5 male jurors, 7 females, 8 jurors under the age of 50, 4 over 50, 5 whites, 5 Asians, African American, and a Hispanic person on this jury. Does race factor into a case like this when you have a old white guy is the defendant and the victim is a white woman, but finance, a very rich old white guy. Suri, your take on that jury, anything stand out to you that would lean one way or another?
I think the age is the factor that I've been more focused on, especially because you can play it both ways. The ones that are a little older, over 50, they can identify that. They know that their health might be deteriorating, and some of these interviews that he has given to the prosecutor, I don't know if they're going to try to get that interview he did with the DA's office when he was in Louisiana, but that interview to me, it showed that he was getting bullied by the person questioning him, and he was getting forced to say things that just are incriminating. So the people that are older might identify with that. No, I don't want to be in that position. And the people that are younger might feel some sympathy for an older, frail man. And he's not pretending. He's not there, and as I said this before, he's not there with a walker pretending to be tired and old. He truly is decrepit.
Yeah, he is tired and old. You mentioned the producers talking to him in the Jinx, the documentary. He also talked to investigators. He talked to investigators and several times throughout his years of being under suspicion. Specifically, what is going to come into this case, we believe, is this interrogation that he did in New Orleans right after he was arrested. Take a look at some of it.
You were able, if you know that the way the body was cut, somebody knew how to cut the joints.
You see, I don't know that. Subsequently, I've been told that a surgeon would cut up a body the same way you do a chicken. You go into the joint and you cut around the joint to get rid of all the ligaments, and then the thing comes out. You're not going to go and try to cut through the bone like I did, which was hard.
Well, you did a pretty good job. The thing that
cutting through a bone is not easy with anything.
No, it's definitely not easy. It's definitely not easy. I don't think you were drunk. I mean, I think you knew what you were doing. You didn't cut yourself, right? I mean, you were able to get this done.
I don't remember if I cut myself or not, but I know that cutting up that body the way I was doing it was the hard way. The proper way is what a surgeon would do with a scalpel, and he would cut around the ligaments and then do it in the joint, not on the bone.
Would you agree, Bob, that somebody who could dismember somebody like that you can understand why we would suspect you of having
Yeah,
killed
that's
your...
what Kathy, mother, and what Gilberti, and I'm sure the other ones think. I did
Okay.
to Kathy.
So I would like to, are you willing to continue? You're going to be going to court right now.
I'm going to court.
Yeah, this morning. I was hoping we could talk to you longer, but they have to get you to court. I would like to talk to you afterwards. It's up to you if you're willing to talk to me or not. You know, it's like I said before, this is all voluntary.
No, I hear you, and I have no problem with what you're saying.
Okay.
But what's going through my mind
Sure.
is, if I tell you what I know
Okay.
that answers your questions, what can you possibly do for me?
He's a doozy. I love him. Robert Durst talking to investigators, and he was talking about Morris Black, his neighbor in Galveston. He was found not guilty of the murder, but did plead guilty to dismembering the body, served some time, and then, of course, now he's been arrested on this new case in California, new old case. Just listening to that, I mean, and the point was made, if you can cut a body up, that probably means you are a different type of individual. And he said, well, that's probably what Kathy's mom thinks. That's Kathy, his first wife. Everybody thinks he killed her. And this is going to come into this case. Isn't that really the power of the state's case this time around? Is it's not just the one murder. They're going to bring up all three of these dead people, and he's in the center of it as suspect number one.
Absolutely. I mean, they're going to bring in everything they can and try and say this isn't just, this isn't just a coincidence. This isn't just all these things happening. I mean, they're going to really try and bring in all of the facts and all of these previous cases and all of those previous matters to try and strengthen their case.
Yeah, his ex-wife was missing. He was the suspect. His girlfriend / assistant confidant, which this jury is now talking about, and they're deciding on, she ends up dead, and a neighbor ends up not only dead but dismembered. And let's listen to him talk about dismembering a human body. How much does the weird factor work against a defendant? And it didn't work against him in Galveston, apparently, because that jury was well aware that he dismembered Mr. Black.
My gut feeling as soon as I hear him talk, like, just say no more, be quiet, ask for your attorney. And he did. At one point, he says, I have attorneys, and the prosecutor kept talking to him. But nonetheless, he is very charming, and some of the things he's saying make sense. To me, makes sense if you can get in his frame of view, which is not the normal frame of view of any other person. He is within the autism spectrum. He thinks differently. He reacts differently. That was the point of the other trial. And when he did dismember somebody, he said he did. He got up there and told the truth and told them what he did and why he did it. Right now, he's saying the complete opposite. And he didn't run. He didn't flee. He has the means, and he didn't. So I think all of that works in his favor. He's talking to the police because he's innocent.
Right. Embrace the weird. If you're Robert Durst's defense team, it worked in Galveston. No reason it can't work in California. We shall see. Coming up, ever since the disappearance of his wife in 1982, Durst has been and had an unsettling history of alleged crimes. We're going to break all that down when we return. Plus, the latest on the Lori Vallow case. Her husband, Chad Daybell, reportedly now saying the kids are safe. Where are they? Stay with us. Welcome back. You're watching Court TV. I'm Ted Rollins. Real estate heir Robert Durst has found himself at the center of a string of alleged crimes, murders, that span decades, leading into his upcoming trial in Los Angeles. Let's take a look at his sordid past of one of the most notable suspects in history. It all started with the death of his first wife, Kathleen, in 1982. He was a suspect out of the gate. No charges, though, because his friend Susan Berman provided an alibi in this case. Fast forward then to November of 2000, the investigation is reopened into the disappearance of Kathleen, his first wife, and that meant that prosecutors were expected to pressure Susan Berman about that alibi. Well, a month later, December 2000, Durst allegedly shoots and kills his friend Susan Berman in California. The motive, according to prosecutors, he wanted to make sure she didn't implicate him in his first wife's death. Then, September 2001 in Galveston, Texas, Durst's neighbor, Morris Black, is found dead, killed and dismembered. 2003, Robert Durst acquitted of murdering Morris Black, but he does end up serving time for evidence tampering after admitting that, yes, he did dismember his neighbor, but he did it because they got into a fight, and it was an accident. Then, in 2015, The Jinx is released. HBO's production of this documentary series features interviews with Robert Durst, including an audio clip at the very end on the last episode of him muttering what some people believe is a confession. What the defense will argue was just him talking to himself in the bathroom. That will be a big part of this upcoming trial in Los Angeles. Again, opening statements expected in LA starting Wednesday morning in this case. It's such a long case, 5 months. The trial is expected to go. Openings are expected to go into 2 days for the state. And then next week, the defense will begin its opening statements. Still with me, trial attorney Dorit Fisher and criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor Chadha Jimenez. 5 months long. It seems ridiculous. I don't care what the case is. But every now and then you get these cases where both sides are sort of in agreement that they're going to take their time and they're going to put this jury through what some could argue a nightmare, but others would say everything. They're going to really go at this case. What does a long trial do? Does it help the defense, or it doesn't help anybody? Dorit, what's your take on a longer trial?
I mean, I think trials have to go for as long as they need to. In this case, we're dealing with a lot of circumstantial evidence. There's no direct forensic evidence. So, I mean, they're really going to need to go through everything and try and make their case. So perhaps it's better for the defense on this side, because the prosecution is really going to need to go through everything and try and make everything fit together. But we'll see. We'll see.
This is going to be storytelling from the prosecution side, Suri, in that, and they're going to rely on those older jurors you talked about earlier, common sense. Like, look at what happened. First wife goes. Berman was his alibi. She goes when we open up the case again. There's a letter, this is a big part of this case, a letter written by Durst saying cadaver to the Beverly Hills Police Department. He spells Beverly wrong. He spells Beverly wrong in something else, another correspondence that he has. Handwriting experts will come in. And apparently he's going to stipulate that, yes, he did write that. All these little pieces. Is it enough to solve a 20-year-old case with no physical evidence besides the letter?
I mean, if we believe that those prosecutors are going by their oath and they're only doing this because they have enough evidence, they believe they can prove it beyond a reasonable doubt. So I think they can. As it's commonly said, is a brick is not a wall, but those bricks, every little piece of evidence slowly builds a story. Maybe that's why they're expecting it's going to take so long, but it's a murder. I can see a long trial when there is multiple crimes and there is like a RICO prosecution, or there's gangs that has multiple co-defendants. We're talking about one guy who, in theory, has motive to kill this alleged witness or alibi witness. And that should take 2 weeks, a month. It's just going to be a battle of the experts. I think it's a waste of resources. They are stewards of the taxpayers' money. This is going to cost millions to the state. The jurors are going to waste their life. I know they're doing it and it's their duty, but they have kids and they have jobs. It's too long.
Too long. All right, Dick DeGuerin is back with the defendant in this case. He's the attorney, the lead attorney that helped the defendant get a not guilty verdict in Galveston, Texas. Let's go back and listen to something, because he's a wonderful attorney. No matter what you think of defense attorneys, boy, this guy's got it down. And he was instrumental in getting that not guilty verdict in Texas. Let's go back and listen to some of his argument to the jury that what happened to Morris Black, self-defense.
You have to judge self-defense from the standpoint of the accused, from Bob Durst's standpoint. Judging from his standpoint, if you were in his shoes and you came to your house, your apartment, your home, and you found Morris Black in there without your permission, and you knew what we all know now about Morris Black, and Morris Black went for a gun, would you be reasonable in being in fear? Would you be reasonable in coming to your own defense? Well, the answer, of course, is yes. Of course you would. That's a reasonable fear. Knowing what Bob knew and knowing what we know now about Morris Black, that's a reasonable fear. Mr. Ramsey, would you pick up the gun, please? And so if you came home and you found Morris Black, and Morris Black started to come at you, come up here, please. Morris Black started to point at you, and you grabbed him like that, and wrestled him, and you tumbled to the ground, would you be acting reasonably? Of course you would. Now that's how self-defense and accident happens. Thank you.
Well, we can only hope that the theatrics that took place in Texas will be back in Los Angeles. I think it's a pretty good bet. Suri, what do you expect out of the openings from Dick DeGuerin? He's a pro.
I cannot even get myself in his mind. I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing it. One of the things that I think they could say is the estate, they're mad because in their mind, they think he got away with murder where he didn't. Jury found him not guilty, and he served his time and paid his debt to society for the dismemberment, which is not the proper way of dealing with a self-defense. Something happens, you call the police right afterwards. And now they just want to go after him for whatever they can because they got to throw the kitchen sink at him and see what sticks.
Dorit, if you're the prosecutor, what are you coming out with in openings?
I mean, I'm certainly going to come out with all the facts of the case, all the facts of the previous case, and say, look, this isn't a coincidence. Look, this isn't just something that keeps happening to just him. So I think they're really going to want to focus in on that history, and it's compelling, and we know that.
Absolutely. And again, common sense is going to be a huge theme for the prosecution throughout. We're going to take a break. When we come back, some other legal news from around the country, including an update on Cult Mom when we return. Stay with us.